At our 10th anniversary party, my wife dropped a bombshell. She said she was leaving me for her boss. Wild, right? But her family? They shut her down on the spot. Fast forward 7 months, and karma's done its thing. Honestly, I'm still reeling. 3 days ago, my whole life basically imploded, and now I'm here trying to make sense of it all. Just typing this feels unreal. Never thought I'd be one of those people spilling their relationship drama online, but here we are. Let's roll with Mark and Sarah as our names, since those are the classics for posts like this. Plus, I'm a little paranoid that someone who knows us might connect the dots. Though, honestly, this story is so nuts, anyone who was there would probably figure it out anyway. Up until 3 days ago, I really thought I had a solid marriage. Not perfect. Whose is? But stable. We had plans, a future mapped out. Guess all that's in the trash now. For context, Sarah has always been intense. When things don't go her way, she's like a switch. 0 to 100. No breaks. She talks a mile a minute, gets loud, slams doors, chucks random stuff, and basically acts like a full-blown storm until everyone gives in. Then comes the silent treatment, radio silence, until she gets exactly what she wants. I put up with it for years, mostly because I loved her. And yeah, I got used to dodging the chaos just to keep things calm. I know how it sounds, trust me. I know. But when you're living it, you don't realize the water's boiling until it's too late. After 10 years, I had all these ways to cope. Spotting her mood shifts, diffusing her outbursts before they blew up, walking on eggshells to keep the peace. Let me paint the picture a bit before I get to the real mess. Like 3 years ago, we decided to tackle some big renovations, new kitchen, updated master bath, that kind of thing. Nothing wild, but we'd been saving forever. And I was pumped to finally make the house feel more like ours instead of just a starter home. Sarah took the reins on the renovation project right away, which was fine by me. She's always had a better eye for design. But then, instead of doing the smart thing and shopping around, she latched onto the first contractor who charmed her in one meeting. No research, no comparison, just, this is the guy. When I checked the quote, it was way over our budget, and there were red flags all over the place. The timeline? Unrealistic. They claimed they could gut and rebuild our entire kitchen in 2 weeks. Anyone who's even heard of home renovations knows that's a joke. The materials section? Super vague. Just stuff like premium countertops and high-quality cabinetry, with zero specifics on brands or materials. Having read my fair share of renovation nightmares on Reddit, I knew this was setting us up for disaster. So, I casually suggested getting a couple more estimates, just to be safe. I wasn't saying her pick was bad. I just figured it was a smart move. Well, you'd think I'd suggested torching the house. She lost it. Full-blown meltdown. Started yelling that I didn't trust her judgment, accused me of sabotaging the whole project, and said I always tore down her ideas to make her feel dumb. Then she stormed off, and I got the silent treatment for 2 solid days. 2 days of her acting like I didn't exist, all because I suggested we get multiple quotes. Eventually, I got her to budge, mostly by leaving renovation horror stories open on my laptop for her to accidentally stumble across. We ended up getting a second estimate, and surprise, surprise, the first contractor was overpriced and unrealistic. The second company flagged all kinds of issues the first guy conveniently ignored. Sarah ended up picking the second company, but never admitted she was wrong. No apology, no acknowledgement. She just acted like going with the second contractor had been her brilliant plan all along. At that point, I was just relieved we weren't getting ripped off, so I let it slide, chalked it up as another battle not worth fighting. Then there was the vacation fiasco about 1.5 years ago. It was my turn to pick the destination. We always alternated, and it usually worked out great. We'd talked about doing something outdoorsy this time, like a cabin near a national park with some solid hiking trails. I thought we were on the same page. Sarah had always seemed to enjoy our hiking trips. Campfires, wine, long talks under the stars. Some of my favorite memories with her, honestly. I'd even been researching for months, had a whole folder of bookmarks on my laptop. Affordable cabins near Yosemite, guided hiking tours, even places that delivered gourmet meal kits to the cabin so we could cook together without much hassle. I was stoked. Dropped little hints here and there about the plans, hoping she'd get excited too. Sarah seemed totally into the outdoor vacation idea. She asked questions, acted excited, the whole deal. Then, out of nowhere, she came home waving some glossy travel mag and raving about a luxury Caribbean resort. Private plunge pools, personal butlers, all that jazz. Suddenly, that's where she wanted to go. Never mind that it was 3 times what we'd budgeted. When I reminded her about the outdoor trip I'd been planning for months and gently brought up the budget, she went nuclear. She started yelling that I was being difficult just to ruin her fun and that I was trying to hold her back from experiences everyone else got to have. Not true. She claimed all our friends took fancy vacations. They didn't, and said I was embarrassing her by being cheap. Also, not true. I'm just not reckless with money. Then she flung a decorative pillow across the room, knocked over a wedding photo, yeah, that felt symbolic, and flat out announced the outdoor trip wasn't happening. She said if I was going to be such a buzzkill, she'd book the resort herself. She slammed the bedroom door so hard, a painting fell off the wall and ignored me for hours. I ended up sleeping on the couch, and when I tried to bring it up the next morning, she acted like it never happened. Next thing I knew, she'd booked the resort on our joint credit card. No discussion, no compromise, just done. I didn't fight it because, honestly, what was the point? Arguing would have just meant more tension and passive-aggressive digs for weeks. So, we went. The resort was nice, sure, but I couldn't enjoy it. The price tag and how we got there ruined it for me. This wasn't a one-off thing either. It was the pattern of our marriage. I'd question something or suggest a different approach, and she'd blow up. After the yelling and silent treatment, she'd go ahead and do whatever she wanted anyway. I'd always try to stay calm. But in the end, I usually caved because dealing with the fallout wasn't worth it. Friends used to joke that Sarah wore the pants in our relationship. They'd nudge me with stuff like, "Happy wife, happy life, right, Mark?" I'd laugh along because what else could I do? Admit I was scared of my wife's temper? That I'd stopped trying to be an equal partner because it felt like a losing battle? Looking back, I can see how messed up the dynamic was. But when you're in it, it's just your normal. You adapt, justify, and tell yourself every relationship has its quirks. I loved Sarah. We had good moments. But the constant walking on eggshells, the unpredictable blow-ups, and feeling like my voice didn't matter, it wore me down. I just didn't realize how much until everything fell apart. Now let me tell you about 3 nights ago. The night that wrecked my marriage and shattered any illusions I had about who Sarah really was. We were celebrating our 10th anniversary at this swanky downtown venue we'd rented out. About 50 people came. Our closest friends, some of my co-workers, and Sarah's family, her parents and 2 younger brothers. My family couldn't make it. They're scattered around the globe. My parents retired in Portugal, and my sisters in Australia. In hindsight, maybe that was for the best. At least they didn't have to witness the circus. Up until that moment, the night had been going great. The food was on point, the bar was open, and everyone seemed to be having a blast. During dinner, guests gave little toasts, sharing stories and congratulating us. Sarah was affectionate, holding my hand under the table, leaning in to whisper jokes about the speeches. I was all set to head up to the small stage to thank everyone for coming and give a short speech I'd prepared. Just a few heartfelt words about Sarah and our 10 years together. But before I could stand up, Sarah walked on stage, and she wasn't alone. She had her boss, David, with her. I had no idea he was even coming to the party. He hadn't been on the guest list we discussed. Apparently, he showed up about an hour into the event after Sarah had briefly left and returned with him. Her family looked surprised to see him too. I caught her dad giving her mom a confused look when David walked in. Sarah grabbed the microphone from the stand, and the room got quiet as people turned to look at her. She had this strange smile on her face, not her usual warm smile, but something different, almost triumphant. She started talking about how tonight was a celebration, but not just of our 10 years together. It was about a new path for her. I remember feeling a twinge of confusion, but assumed she was talking about a job promotion or something. Then, with absolutely no warning, she announced that she was leaving me. The room went dead silent. Everyone was looking back and forth between us, completely shocked. I felt like someone had just knocked all the air out of my lungs. My brain couldn't process what was happening, like the words didn't make sense together. Sarah and leaving me were concepts that couldn't occupy the same space in my universe. I kept thinking there must be some mistake that I'd misheard, or that this was some kind of bizarre joke. But then she kept going and it got so much worse. She pointed to David standing beside her. He's about 10 years older than us, divorced twice already from what I'd heard, and said she was leaving me for him because she had found someone better, someone who was truly man enough to give me what I want, which is a baby, and building a family. Those words, man enough, they cut through me like a knife. We'd been trying for a baby for the last few years without success, and I'd recently found out I had some fertility issues. It was something I was still coming to terms with, something deeply personal that we'd only shared with our closest family members. And there she was throwing it in my face in front of everyone we knew. She finished by saying, "This is happening now. This is my choice, and I am moving forward with it." In this cold, determined voice I barely recognized. Like she was announcing a business decision instead of blowing up a decade-long marriage. I just stood there frozen. It felt like I'd been punched in the gut. No, worse. Like I'd been hit by a truck and was somehow still standing. I couldn't breathe. My face felt hot, then cold. The room seemed to tilt and sway around me. I looked around at all these people staring at me with pity and shock. Friends who had just been congratulating us. Co-workers who would now have this as their dominant memory of me. Sarah's family who looked as blindsided as I felt. Then I looked back at Sarah standing proudly next to her boss. This guy who'd been in our home for dinner parties, who'd shaken my hand and looked me in the eye while apparently sleeping with my wife behind my back. My mind was racing, trying to piece together when this could have started, how long it had been going on, how I could have missed all the signs. We'd had dinner together just the night before, talking about the party details. She'd kissed me goodbye that morning before work. How do you go from that to publicly humiliating your husband of 10 years? What kind of person does that? Before I could even begin to formulate a response, Sarah's father suddenly stood up from his table. He pointed at Sarah and said, "Your behavior is shameful, Sarah. The things you are saying about Mark are hurtful and untrue, and doing this in front of everyone is beyond disrespectful." Her mother stood up next and added, "We did not raise you to behave this way. We do not support what you are doing, not one bit." But her father wasn't done. He delivered the final blow because of your actions tonight. The way you've humiliated your husband and yourself. We consider you to have cut yourself off from this family. We disown you, Sarah. All four of them nodded in agreement and walked out of the venue, not even looking back when Sarah called after them. I've known Sarah's family for over a decade. They're traditional but loving people, big on family loyalty and doing the right thing. I'd never seen them like this, so united in their disgust and disappointment. I think that's when the reality of what was happening truly hit me. If even her own family, who had always supported and loved her unconditionally, were walking away from her over this, then what she'd done was truly beyond the pale. Sarah's clearly hadn't expected that reaction. She started screaming after them, her voice high-pitched and panicked, though I couldn't make out her exact words over the blood rushing in my ears. David tried to put his hand on her arm in what looked like an attempt to calm her down, but she yanked it away violently. In that moment, she looked completely unhinged, a far cry from the confident woman who had just announced she was leaving me for a better man moments before. I finally snapped out of my shock. A strange calm came over me as I walked up to the stage. I think it was my brain's way of protecting me, shutting down all emotions so I could function. I kept my voice perfectly level, cold, even as I looked both of them in the eye and said, "You need to leave." Now, I could hear how different my voice sounded, like it belonged to someone else. David, that smug bastard, actually had the audacity to try to smooth things over. He started to say, "Mark, we need to talk." But I cut him off mid-sentence. "No, we don't. You both need to get the out of here before I punch your nose in right now." I pointed toward the exit her family had used. Something in my expression must have told them I wasn't going to say it a third time. They exchanged a look, then moved from the stage to a nearby table where they'd left some personal items. After they left, 50 people and not a single word being spoken, just shocked faces staring at me, waiting to see what I would do next. My boss was there with his wife, some of my oldest friends, people who had known us as a couple for our entire relationship. I felt a responsibility to say something to somehow provide closure to this absolute train wreck of an evening. I walked back to the stage area. I cleared my throat and said, "I think it's clear that the party is over. I'm sorry it had to end this way." My voice cracked a little, but I pushed through it. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate your support." What else could I say? Surprise. My wife's been cheating on me with her boss, and I found out the same time you did. Or don't worry, I'm only dying inside. There was nothing that could salvage the situation. No words that could make any of us forget what had just happened. People started gathering their things, whispering to each other, giving me these awful looks of pity as they headed for the door. A few of my closer friends came up to me, awkwardly patted my shoulder or gave me brief hugs, mumbling things like, "Call if you need anything," or "I'm so sorry, man." I nodded mechanically. Thank them. But I couldn't really process anything they were saying. It was like I was underwater, everything muffled and distant. Within about 30 minutes, the place was empty, except for the venue staff, who were clearly uncomfortable and trying to be as unobtrusive as possible as they started cleaning up. I stayed to help with the initial cleanup, partly because it was in our rental agreement, but mostly because I needed something to do, some normal task to focus on while my brain tried to catch up with reality. The venue manager kept giving me these sympathetic looks, which somehow made everything worse. I paid the remaining balance we owed, signed whatever paperwork she put in front of me, and finally left. When I got home and walked into our empty house, it hit me all over again. 10 years of marriage gone. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed we'd shared for a decade, and finally broke down. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I pulled myself together enough to check my phone. I had a flood of texts from Sarah. Her messages were all over the place, shocked about her family's reaction. I can't believe they would do this to me, admitting the announcement was a mistake, but not backing down on leaving me. I shouldn't have done it that way, but you have to understand I need to move on, suggesting we talk or see a counselor. We should sit down with someone who can help us through this transition. Claiming it was a cry for help without explaining what help she needed, or why she'd choose to cry for help, by publicly humiliating me, and then somehow trying to blame me for her decision to leave. If you had been more attentive, if you had taken my needs more seriously, it wouldn't have come to this. The messages kept changing in tone and content, like she was desperately throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. One minute she was the victim of her cruel family, the next she was magnanimously offering to talk things through with me. Then she was the wrong party who had been driven to extreme measures by my failings as a husband. It was classic Sarah, unable to take responsibility for her actions, always looking for a way to spin the narrative, so she came out looking better. But this time, there was no spinning it. She'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I didn't reply to any of them or answer her calls. I decided to contact a divorce lawyer the next morning and made an appointment to start the formal process of ending our marriage. I'm writing this to document what happened, not to ask if what I'm doing is right. I know what I need to do. I'm just trying to make sense of how my life fell apart so completely in one night. Update. 1 week later. Thanks for all the comments on my first post. Some of you asked for more details about the party and Sarah's family's reaction, so I'll clarify a few things. The party was held in a private room we rented for the evening. Sarah's parents and brothers had been there from the start, sitting at a reserve table near the stage area. My family couldn't attend because they live overseas. David, Sarah's boss, wasn't on the guest list. He showed up about an hour in after Sarah had briefly left and returned with him. Her family seemed surprised to see him too, based on their reactions. For those asking about Sarah's exact words, I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like, "Everybody, I have something to tell you. Tonight is not just about being married for 10 years. It is about a new path for me. I am leaving Mark. I am leaving Mark for David. She pointed at him. I found someone who is better for me. Someone who is truly man enough to give me what I want, which is a baby and building a family. This is happening now. This is my choice, and I am moving forward with it. My decision to file for divorce immediately was based purely on these facts. She publicly ended our marriage, humiliated me in front of everyone we know, announced she was with another man, and said cruel, untrue things about me. The fact that her own family reacted so strongly and cut ties with her showed just how serious and inexcusable her actions were. Her messages afterward were just damage control. They didn't offer any real explanation or show any genuine remorse. The morning after the party, I met with a divorce lawyer, explained everything that happened, provided the necessary information about our marriage, finances, and assets, and told him to prepare the divorce papers. He filed the petition for dissolution of marriage, which I signed and had a process server deliver the papers to Sarah at our house where she was still living at that point. Once Sarah got served, her messages became more frequent and aggressive. She kept demanding I withdraw the divorce petition, claimed I had no right to file for divorce, insisted the party incident was just a mistake that I was blowing out of proportion, and alternated between threatening me and insulting me. She even had the nerve to say I was trying to ruin her life, as if she hadn't just blown up our marriage in the most public and humiliating way possible. I didn't respond to any of her messages, but saved them all and forwarded the threatening ones to my lawyer. I instructed him to tell Sarah's lawyer, yes. She hired one quickly, that all future communication about the divorce had to go through our attorneys. I'm done talking to her directly. So, that's where things stand. Divorce proceedings have officially begun. We're communicating only through our lawyers, and I'm trying to pick up the pieces of my life. Update, 7 months later. It's been a while since my last update, and a lot has happened. The divorce is now finalized, and I'm finally starting to feel like I can breathe again. After Sarah got served with the divorce papers and hired her own lawyer, she filed her response to the petition for dissolution. In it, she conveniently left out the real reason for our separation. You know, her public announcement and humiliation of me, and had the audacity to request alimony. Alimony. After publicly dumping me for another man and saying I wasn't man enough to give her a baby, her request for spousal support was based on income disparity and the length of our marriage, but conveniently ignored the circumstances that led to our separation. It was like she thought she could rewrite history and pretend she was the victim somehow. Around the same time, I started hearing from mutual friends that Sarah was contacting them and spinning a very different version of events, trying to make herself look like the wrong party. The combination of her asking for my money in court while simultaneously trying to damage my reputation was the last straw. When my lawyer showed me her alimony request, we discussed how courts in our state handle these situations. While judges primarily look at factors like the length of the marriage and income differences, the circumstances of the separation can sometimes be considered, too. My lawyer sent a formal letter to Sarah's attorney stating that if she continued pursuing alimony, I would introduce detailed evidence about the circumstances of our separation. This would include sworn statements from me, and potentially witness testimonies describing exactly what happened at the anniversary party. Her public announcement about leaving me for her boss, the specific words she used to humiliate me, and her family's immediate and harsh reaction, including their public disownment of her. We didn't make any threats outside the legal process. We simply stated what evidence would be presented in court if she insisted on seeking alimony. It was all above board and by the book. The effect was immediate. Within days, Sarah's lawyer informed mine that she was withdrawing her request for spousal support. They filed the formal paperwork shortly after, officially removing the alimony claim from the divorce case. I've heard through the grapevine that things haven't gone well for Sarah since that night. About 2 months after the party, she left or was fired from her job at the company where David was her boss. Apparently, she hasn't been able to find comparable work since then. Her financial situation took a nosedive, and she ended up having to move in with one of her cousins because she couldn't afford her own place. Her family has maintained their position and hasn't reconciled with her since the anniversary party, which limited her support network. So, here's how everything played out in sequence. Sarah publicly ended our marriage at our anniversary party. Her family disowned her on the spot, I filed for divorce the next day. She demanded alimony. I threatened to expose the full extent of her behavior, and Sarah backed off her alimony request. She ended up losing her job and had to move in with a relative because of financial struggles. The divorce is finalized now. Splitting up our assets was relatively simple given the state of our finances, and the court issued the decree officially ending our marriage. Sarah's life looks very different now. She's no longer at her old job, isn't receiving any financial support from me, and is staying with her cousin. We don't have any direct contact anymore. Everything goes through our lawyers if needed, which is pretty rare now that everything's settled. From what I've heard, her family hasn't softened their stance and still isn't speaking to her. As for updates, there won't be any more. This chapter is closed and I'm finally moving on with my life. The past 7 months were hands down the hardest of my life. For those wondering about David, he and Sarah didn't last long after her over-the-top declaration of love. Word is they broke up around the time she left the company. I don't know the details, and honestly, I don't care. To everyone who supported me through this mess, thank you. Your advice kept me grounded when I felt like giving in just to end the pain. I'm in a much better place now, and I'm genuinely looking forward to whatever's next.